The city was still half asleep when the alarm clock on the nightstand buzzed sharply at 5:30 a.m. Sarah Parker reached out with a tired hand to silence it. Her eyes stung with exhaustion, but she didn't allow herself to rest even for a minute more. Mornings were chaos in her small apartment. "Mommy, 5 more minutes," mumbled a little voice from the bed beside her. Sarah smiled faintly. "Up we go, soldier," she whispered, tickling her 6-year-old son's tiny feet. Ethan giggled, squirming under the covers. His laughter was the sweetest sound she knew, the one thing that kept her moving when life felt too heavy. Their apartment was small, the wallpaper faded, but she made it a home filled with warmth. She had lost her husband in an accident years ago and had learned to be both mother and father. Every morning, she packed Ethan's lunch, made oatmeal, and found creative ways to make the day exciting for him. But this morning, she was already behind schedule. The rain outside was relentless. It beat against the windows as thunder rolled in the distance. Sarah looked at the clock. 6:42 a.m. The bus came at 6:50. She had 8 minutes to finish breakfast, get Ethan dressed, and run to the stop 2 blocks away. By 6:48, she was dragging Ethan's little backpack onto his shoulders, both of them hurrying through the puddles. "Hold my hand, sweetheart," she shouted over the sound of rushing rain. Her shoes were soaked, her umbrella bent against the wind. When they finally reached the bus stop, the driver was already closing the doors. "Wait, please," she cried. The driver frowned but held them open. They climbed aboard, dripping and breathless. Ethan rested his head on her lap as the bus rattled down the wet road. She was due at Ellison Industries by 8 a.m. sharp. Alexander Ellison, the billionaire owner, was known for his strictness. He valued punctuality above all. In his world, people who were late didn't deserve a second chance. Unfortunately, Sarah had been late twice before, once because Ethan got sick, and once because their power went out and her alarm never rang. She clutched her handbag tightly, anxiety twisting in her stomach. "Please, not today," she whispered. But fate had other plans. Halfway through the ride, the bus suddenly shuddered to a stop. The driver cursed under his breath. "Engine's dead," he muttered, pulling open the side door. Rain poured in instantly. Sarah's heart sank. No, she looked at her phone. 7:27. There was no way to get there in time unless she ran. "Stay here, Ethan," she said. "Grandma's house is 2 blocks away. Go there, okay, I'll pick you up after work." "Mommy, you'll get wet," Ethan said, worried. She smiled and kissed his forehead. "A little rain never hurt anyone. Be good, my love." Then she ran. Through the cold, pounding rain. Through the puddles that soaked her shoes, the cars that splashed water onto her dress, the red lights that seemed to stop just to slow her down. By the time she reached the towering glass building of Ellison Industries, it was 8:20 a.m. Her heart pounded in her chest as she tried to fix her hair in the reflection of the glass doors. Her clothes were drenched, her shoes squeaked with every step, and her hands shook from the chill. The security guard, an older man named Tom, gave her a sympathetic look. "Sarah, you're late again," he said softly. "I know," she breathed, "but please, Mr. Ellison hasn't arrived yet, has he?" Tom hesitated. "He's been in since 7. Her stomach dropped. She rushed toward the elevator, pressing the button with trembling fingers. The ride to the top floor felt like an eternity. As the doors opened, the sleek silence of the executive office greeted her. No noise, no chatter, just the sound of her own heartbeat. And then she saw him, Alexander Ellison. He stood by the tall windows, his back straight, a dark suit perfectly tailored to his frame. He didn't need to raise his voice to command attention, his presence alone did that. When he turned, his steel-gray eyes landed on her, sharp and unreadable. "Miss Parker," he said coolly, "you're 20 minutes late." Sarah swallowed. "I'm so sorry, sir." "The bus." He lifted a hand. "Don't. I've heard enough of your excuses." Her breath caught in her throat. "Please, Mr. Ellison, I've never wanted to be late." "I had to." He interrupted again, his tone colder now. "You're a capable employee, Sarah, but punctuality is non-negotiable. You've been late 3 times this month. I can't allow personal issues to interfere with professional responsibility." The words stung more than she expected. She wanted to scream, I'm doing my best. You don't know what I go through every morning. But she bit her tongue. Tears threatened to spill, but she forced herself to stay calm. Mr. Ellison, she said quietly, I have a 6-year-old. I don't have anyone to watch him before school. I'm trying to. I don't pay salaries based on personal stories, he said firmly. You're dismissed. HR will handle your exit paperwork. It felt like the floor disappeared beneath her. You're firing me. He didn't even look up from his computer. Effective immediately. Sarah stood frozen for a long moment. Her throat burned. Her heart felt like glass shattering silently inside her chest. Without another word, she turned and walked out. Her footsteps echoed down the corridor, her vision blurred by tears. She could hear whispers from coworkers, but she didn't care. Her world had just crumbled. Outside, the rain had stopped, but the clouds still hung heavy above. She took a deep breath and walked toward the bus stop, clutching her bag against her chest like a shield. By the time she reached her mother's small house to pick up Ethan, her eyes were swollen. The boy ran to her, arms wide. Mommy. She hugged him tightly, forcing a smile. Hey, sweetheart. He looked up at her face and frowned. You're crying. She shook her head. No, just tired. That night, after tucking Ethan into bed, she sat by the window in silence. The city lights flickered far away. She thought about how hard she had worked, how much she had sacrificed, and how easily everything had been taken away. Her rent was due in 2 weeks. Her savings were barely enough to last a month. She felt crushed, invisible, and defeated. But when she glanced at her sleeping son, she found strength again. No matter what happens, she whispered, brushing a strand of hair from Ethan's forehead, I'll never give up. For you. Outside, thunder rumbled faintly, echoing her heart's turmoil. She didn't know it yet, but the man who had just fired her would soon realize how wrong he had been. Because the very next morning, destiny would put them face to face again, in a way neither of them could ever forget. She was fired for being late, until the billionaire boss realized she saved his son. The next morning dawned cold and gray. The rain had finally stopped, but the city still looked weary under the weight of the storm. In his penthouse apartment, Alexander Ellison adjusted his cufflinks in front of the mirror. His reflection stared back at him, sharp suit, emotionless eyes. Everything about him screamed control and precision. Yet, for some reason, he couldn't focus. He'd barely slept. His mind kept circling back to that woman from yesterday, Sarah Parker. The look in her eyes when he fired her had stuck with him. There had been no anger, no defiance, only heartbreak and exhaustion. Why'd I even care? He muttered under his breath, shaking the thought away. She was late. I did what any leader would do. He straightened his tie and checked his watch, 8 a.m. sharp. Time to drop his 7-year-old son, Liam, off at school before heading to headquarters. Ready, buddy? He asked as Liam came running into the room, his backpack bouncing on his shoulders. Yes, Dad, the boy said cheerfully. I've got my homework, and Mrs. Grant said we're going on a field trip today. Alexander smiled faintly, a rare sight. Liam was the only light left in his life since his wife had passed away 3 years earlier. Every decision he made, every hour he worked, was for his son. But deep down, he knew he wasn't around enough. His company took all his time, and guilt gnawed at him in quiet moments. He kissed Liam on the forehead. I'll see you tonight. Be good, okay, always. Liam grinned, climbing into the car as the family driver started the engine. 2 hours later, traffic had backed up on the main highway. Alexander was on a conference call when his driver suddenly swerved and slammed the brakes. Sir, the driver shouted, there's been an accident. Alexander looked up sharply. Just ahead, smoke curled into the air. A small yellow school bus had veered off the road, one side dented, the hood catching fire. Parents and bystanders were rushing toward it, panic in their voices. For a second, his heart froze. Liam's school bus was yellow. He flung the car door open before the driver could stop him. His polished shoes hit the pavement as he ran toward the smoke. His pulse thundered in his ears. A crowd had already formed, shouting for help. There are kids inside, someone yelled. Alexander's blood turned to ice. He tried to push through, but the flames made it impossible to get close. Firefighters hadn't arrived yet. The bus door was jammed, and smoke poured from the windows. "Please, someone help," screamed a teacher standing nearby. Then, through the chaos, he saw her. A woman broke away from the crowd, coughing but determined, running straight toward the burning bus. Her hair was messy, her clothes damp and streaked with ash, but there was no mistaking her face. Sarah Parker. Before anyone could stop her, she climbed into the smoke-filled bus. Children were crying inside, terrified. She guided one little girl out, then another, her voice steady and soothing. "It's okay, honey, come to me," one at a time. But when she turned back, she saw one child still trapped, a boy pinned behind a seat. "Help!" The boy coughed weakly. Sarah crawled through the narrow aisle, ignoring the flames licking at her sleeves. She pulled the twisted metal seat aside with trembling hands. "I've got you, sweetheart. Hold on." When she lifted him into her arms and stumbled out through the doorway, Alexander's world shattered. Because the child in her arms was Liam. He ran forward, his voice breaking. "Liam, oh my God." Sarah blinked through the smoke, realizing who he was. "Mr. Ellison," she croaked, her throat raw. The boy coughed weakly. "Dad." Alexander dropped to his knees beside them, clutching his son's hand. "I'm here, buddy, I'm here." Tears filled his eyes as he looked up at Sarah, the woman he had fired only yesterday, the woman who had just risked her life to save his son. "Is he okay?" she asked, coughing hard. "He will be," Alexander whispered. "Because of you." Paramedics arrived moments later, surrounding them. Sarah waved them toward Liam, insisting they take care of him first. She was coughing violently, her face streaked with soot, her arms red with burns. "Ma'am, you need medical attention too," one of the medics urged. "I'm fine," she rasped. "Just take care of the boy." Alexander stared at her, overwhelmed. For the first time in years, he couldn't find the right words. At the hospital, hours later, Liam was resting safely in a hospital bed, his arm bandaged but otherwise unharmed. Alexander sat beside him, holding his small hand. "Daddy," Liam whispered, "the lady saved me. She said not to be scared." Alexander's throat tightened. "I know, son. She's very brave. She was nice," Liam said softly. She smiled, even though it hurt to breathe. Alexander blinked back tears. He hadn't cried since his wife's funeral, but now, his chest ached with guilt. He had treated that woman like she was worthless, and she had saved the person he loved most in the world. He stood and walked down the corridor until he found her, sitting on a hospital bench, a blanket around her shoulders. She looked pale, exhausted, but calm. "Sarah," he said quietly. She looked up, startled. "Mr. Ellison." He hesitated, then sat beside her. For a long moment, neither spoke. Finally, he said, "I don't know how to thank you." His voice was unsteady. "You saved my son's life." She smiled faintly. Any mother would have done the same. He shook his head. "No, I wouldn't have even been there. I was too busy being me." He let out a bitter laugh. "Yesterday, I fired you for being late. Today, you ran into a burning bus." Her expression softened. "Sometimes being late isn't carelessness, Mr. Ellison. Sometimes it's because someone's trying too hard to keep everything from falling apart." Her words hit him like a punch. He had spent years judging people by efficiency, discipline, and performance, forgetting that not everyone lived his kind of life. He exhaled deeply. "You've taught me more in one day than I've learned in a lifetime." She looked down. "I didn't mean to teach you anything. I just wanted everyone safe." He nodded. "And for that, I owe you more than words." He reached into his jacket and handed her an envelope. Inside was a check, more zeros than she'd ever seen in her life. "I can't take this," she said, eyes wide. "Yes, you can," he replied softly. "It's not payment, it's gratitude. You didn't just save my son, you saved me, too, from my own blindness." Her eyes filled with tears. "Thank you, sir." He smiled gently. "Actually, it's Alexander, and I'd like you to come back to work. Not as a receptionist, as my personal assistant. Someone I can trust completely." Sarah blinked in disbelief. "Are you serious?" "Completely. You've proven what kind of person you are. I want that kind of strength beside me." For the first time in days, Sarah's face lit up with hope. Thank you, Alexander. He extended a hand. Welcome back, Sarah. The next week, a black car waited outside Sarah's apartment every morning, one that took both her and Ethan safely to school and work. She was never late again, not because she feared losing her job, but because someone finally understood her worth. And each time Alexander watched her walk in with that quiet determination, he remembered the lesson she had given him. Success isn't about perfection, it's about compassion, and the courage to see people for who they truly are.